battle. I believe that each one of us who have gone through a period of fasting have experienced a deeper and stronger relationship with God. Now, how many of you have experienced battle going on in your life on the period of fasting? Can I see your hand? Okay, you know why? Because a lot of things are being exposed by God. We become sensitive to the Lord. Throughout our life as a Christian, God has been telling us a lot of things. But many times, we close our ear and we refuse to listen to His still small voice. But during the period of fasting, our spirit begins to connect with God's Spirit and we become more sensitive to Him. And that's why there are a lot of things that we allow God to deal in our lives. And can I make it because the cleansing is continuous during the time of fast, not only physically, but also spiritually. And when you come out of fasting, you become more sensitive to God. In our experience last night, we had our funeral service for the father of one of our church members, Rose Jean. And I remember I had my notes that I'm going to preach, and I was thinking this is a short note, so maybe after a few minutes matapos ko na din. But I didn't realize that God has something to tell to the people. And so the message just flowed. And at the end, we had an altar call and leading people to pray to receive Christ. So we don't know how the Lord can use us. But when we allow God to cleanse us, we become sensitive to Him. And so today we're going to look at the battle, because the battle is real. The spiritual battle is there. Each one of us goes through a battle in our life because Satan would like to intimidate us. Satan would like to discourage us. Satan would like to cause us to give up. But the Lord will strengthen us. And that's why we're going to look at the life of a person, a king, and his name is Jehoshaphat. But before we look at his life, we need to understand what happened to Israel. Why Jehoshaphat was called by God for this particular moment. So we have to understand that Solomon was the wisest king of Israel. And he was the son of David. And who is David? David is a man after God's own heart. So kanami ang lineage na. However, Solomon, towards the end of his life, he went out and enjoyed the world. In fact, the Bible says he has 1,000 women in his life. The wisest man gave his life enjoying the world, enjoying all other things. But the good thing is, just on the last part of his life, he decided to turn back to God. And that's why we have the book of Ecclesiastes. What does the book of Ecclesiastes tell us? Life is meaningless. Why did Solomon conclude that way? Because he said, on your own, life is without meaning. And that's why in the end he said, his conclusion, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And so he wanted to teach that to his son. But his son was not able to capture the last words of the father. Why? Because he grew up seeing the way his dad enjoyed the world. And he began to think that this is the way that I should live. And so the son of Solomon, named Rehoboam, took over the kingdom after the death of Solomon. However, instead of listening to the wise man, he listened to his barkada, to his friends, to his peers. Now, how many of us have experienced that way? Kaya instead na mamatinta sa mga wise men, sa mga people who are spiritually mature, we'd rather listen to our barkada. You know, I have experienced a lot of times when people would come to me and ask, is it okay to do this? Is it okay to do that? And of course, I'll give them a straight answer. Especially if I feel that something is not black and is not gray area. But you're going to be surprised how come they do it anyway. Because after talking to you, they talk to their barkada said it's okay, so they listen to their barkada anyway. And so that's what happened to Rehoboam. Rehoboam chose to listen to his peers, to his barkada, rather than to the wise men of Israel, or the elders. And so as a result, a rebellion happened in the kingdom of Israel. And one of the faithful subjects of the north and to the south. 10 tribes followed Jeroboam. And that's why his kingdom on the north was called Israel. The sad part is only 2 tribes remained faithful to Rehoboam, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And they were called Judah. So now the northern kingdom is called Israel, the southern kingdom is called Judah. But most of the northern kings that followed after Jeroboam were wicked kings. But those who followed Rehoboam, who succeeded Rehoboam, a lot of them followed the heart of David, even though Rehoboam did not. And so we have Jehoshaphat, who came from the lineage of David. His father was King Asa, who was a good king, and he maintained that kind of heart. During his reign, on the northern part was one of the most wicked kings, whose name is Ahab. Who is Ahab? His wife probably is more famous because the wife's name is Jezebel. They were responsible in leading Israel away from God and into worshiping idols, particularly Baal. And so that's what happened. That's the picture in which Jehoshaphat came into the story. And this is how the Bible introduced Jehoshaphat. The Bible says the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because in his early years, he walked in the ways his father David had followed. He did not consult the Baals, but sought the God of his father and followed his command rather than the practices of Israel. The Lord established the kingdom under his control, and all Judah brought gifts to Jehoshaphat, so that he had great wealth and honor. His heart was devoted to the ways of the Lord. Furthermore, he removed the high places and the Asherah poles from Judah. What do we mean by the word devoted? Devoted. We have heard the song, Hopelessly Devoted to You. Okay? You're devoted to a person, but the person does not even recognize you exist. So it's a hopeless devotion. But when we talk about the word devoted, it is connected to what we say personal devotion or quiet time. What is personal devotion? It is the time that we spend with God. We love God, we are devoted to God, and so we are devoting that time with Him. To devote means to consecrate, to set apart. And that is the way we show that we are devoted to a person. And so for Jehoshaphat, he did his best to be totally and wholeheartedly committed and devoted to God. And that's why the Bible tells us he removed the high places. What are the high places? The places that have altars to worship false god. He removed the poles. What are the poles? They are pagan objects of worship. So he removed all this, and his heart was devoted to the way of the Lord. And the Bible continues to say, the fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms of the land surrounding Judah, so that they did not make war with Jehoshaphat. So they were afraid of Jehoshaphat. Some Philistines brought Jehoshaphat gifts and silver as tribute. Now who are the Philistines? The Philistines are not the people who are living in the Philippines, but they are the enemies of Israel. If you remember the story of David and Goliath, Goliath was a Philistine. They were dreaded people, and they were people who have been a thorn to the Israelites throughout their reign. So we have to understand that the power of Jehoshaphat grew to the point that the Philistines were afraid that Jehoshaphat might come and attack them. And so they continue to bring tribute to Jehoshaphat as peace offering. And the Bible says the Arabs brought him flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 goats. So all the people